M2 versus M4. Aside from the looks that I think the M2 is growing on people from what I hear, but when it first came out, the new version, or I think it was like the 23 and the 24, maybe the 22, I actually forget off the top of my head, but that new grille, the new look, people weren't really sure about it, but I think now it's growing on people. But nonetheless, why one over the other? Aside from the price tag, which we're actually going to look at the end of this video, what else kind of, can you be thinking about, and what is going to ultimately go into your decision when you're figuring out M2 versus M4? So let's go ahead and dive into a couple of different pieces here. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is the engine, the S58. Now, the S58 is arguably the most customizable engine right now when it comes to BMW. If we're thinking about most reliable and strongest engine, it'll probably still go to the B58. So for example, I had an M440i before I got my M2, and it had the B58 engine in it. And a lot of people say that's the most reliable engine, but as far as the most customizable, the S58 is usually the way to go. Okay, so what is it? It's an inline six, 3.0 liter, looking at about 500 horse, give or take, okay? So that's what's in the M4. Now, ironically enough, it's also what's in the M2, okay? So you are still getting literally the same exact engine, same exact power. The biggest difference would be, obviously from the size of the cars, the weight, etc. All right, but we're going to dive into all that. But point being is this. You still get the same engine. So whether you go with the M4 or you go with the M2, you're going to get the same engine, okay? That's first. Now, what's interesting about this is if you look here, it's clocking at 453 horsepower. The M4 states, where is it? 503 horsepower. So you're looking at like a 50 horsepower difference there, right? Give or take. Now, it's the same engine, so there must be something more or less throttled down here, okay? Now, here's what I'll say though. I've looked at a couple of dyno tests, and the dyno tests do show 500 horse for the M2. So I don't exactly know why it's clocked at 453, but what I can tell you is I don't believe there is a huge difference here with overall horsepower, okay? Now, if we look peak torque at 406 pounds, does it tell us here? Let's see. Horsepower, condition, torque, 479 pounds. Okay, so you got 479 pounds of torque in the M4, and you got 406 pounds in the M2. So again, 406 pounds M2, 479 M4. That could be where the differences are more or less kind of coming out there. Okay, so weight-wise, because this is going to be a big factor as well. The M4 is a larger car, and this is something to really think about as well when you're getting this car. If it's going to be your daily, or if you want something a little bit more spacious. Now, here's what I can tell you. I have a 2024 M2. I'm 5'10", and I had back surgery a couple of years ago. So, point being is, when I get in a car, I need it to be comfortable. In terms of space, I have no issues with the M2. Getting in and out, a little bit, again, because I'm a bigger guy, so I'm kind of, awkwardly moving a little bit when I'm getting in and out of the M2. But I think it's just all cars for me and all sedans for me. So I maybe don't listen to that part of my understanding of the various sizes there. But what I can tell you is, size wise, yes, you're going to see a difference with the M4 versus the M2, okay? M4, you're looking at around 3,800 to 4,300 pounds. My assumption with the differences here are like M4 versus the comp versus if it's convertible versus if it's a hardtop. I don't know. Let me see. To my I think there are 4 doors. So that could play a factor in as well for this, various trim, etc. Now, the weight for the M2, you're looking at 3,800 pounds, all right? So again, depending on the trim, right? So 3,800 pounds for the M2, subtle differences here, well, you know, larger differences, right, on this side of the spectrum for the M4. Now, what does that mean? Lighter car, you're obviously going to be moving a little bit faster, right? At least, you know, at the start. So why does that kind of matter? Well, it could matter for a couple of different reasons. First things first, the M2 does not have xDrive. What does that mean? That means that it is rear wheel drive. The M4, all wheel drive. That could be something that you may have to take into consideration as well, right? And again, it'll be taken into consideration when you're also thinking about the weight. So funny enough, what I can tell you is I looked at a couple of videos, I read a couple articles, I watched a couple of videos, and the M2 is supposedly, if you're on a straightaway, it'll be faster. Now, I haven't personally tested that myself. Probably should. Legally, of course. But one other thing that I'll say, and this is what I've heard with the M240i, the M240i has xDrive, it has all-wheel drive. So it'll catch up. Something else to keep in mind. I know we're talking about the M2 versus the M4, but if you're thinking about the M240i, not a bad option either. All right, so one video down. In this video, we took a look at the weight, we took a look at the engine, we took a look at some differences there between torque and such. In the next video, we're gonna take a look at pricing. We're gonna, you know, kind of compare different dealerships and such, and then get an idea of what our monthly payment is gonna be at the end.